A compassionate woman named Ava always did her best to help others, even when the world didn't treat her kindly. But when she saves a white child from drowning one day and is met with cold stares and whispers, Ava's quiet life is turned upside down, and she is forced to face a battle she never expected. What was it about that moment that changed everything for Ava? And how did her act of bravery transform her life in ways no one could have anticipated? Let's find out. But before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from today, and if you enjoy this tale of courage and resilience, don't forget to subscribe. The sun hung high in the cloudless sky, casting a warm glow over Oak Ridge Park. It was a perfect summer day, the kind that drew families out of their homes and into the community pool. Among the crowd was Ava Thompson, a 32-year-old black woman with a gentle smile and kind eyes that sparkled behind her glasses. Ava sat on the edge of a lounge chair, her feet dangling in the cool water. She watched her 8-year-old niece, Zoe, splash around in the shallow end with other children. A content sigh escaped her lips as she basked in the simple joy of the moment. "Aunt Ava, watch this," Zoe called out, preparing to show off her latest swimming trick. Ava's face lit up with pride. "I'm watching, sweetie. Show me what you've got." As Zoe performed an underwater somersault, Ava clapped enthusiastically. Her niece's infectious giggle echoed across the pool, drawing a few glances from nearby parents. Ava couldn't help but notice how some of those glances lingered a bit too long, carrying a weight she was all too familiar with. She straightened her back instinctively, a habit formed from years of trying to appear non-threatening in spaces where she often felt out of place. A group of women nearby whispered among themselves, their eyes darting towards Ava occasionally. She pretended not to notice, focusing instead on Zoe's antics in the water. It wasn't anything new, these subtle reminders that she was different, that she didn't quite belong in this affluent, predominantly white neighborhood. Ava's mind drifted to her classroom at Oak Ridge Elementary, where she taught 3rd grade. There, surrounded by the eager faces of her students, she felt at home. In that room, skin color didn't matter. She was simply Ms. Thompson, the teacher who made learning fun and always had a kind word for everyone. "Is this seat taken?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. Ava looked up to see Sarah Miller, one of her students' mothers, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. Sarah's son, Tommy, was in Ava's class this year. "Oh, not at all," Ava replied with a welcoming smile. "Please have a seat." Sarah settled into the chair, her designer sunglasses perched atop her perfectly styled blonde hair. "It's such a lovely day, isn't it?" she remarked, her tone polite but distant. "It really is," Ava agreed. "The kids are having a blast." A moment of awkward silence stretched between them. Ava could sense Sarah's discomfort, the way she seemed to be searching for something to say. "Tommy's doing so well in your class," Sarah finally offered. "He talks about you all the time." Ava's face brightened. "That's wonderful to hear. Tommy's such a bright boy. He has a real talent for creative writing." Sarah nodded, a hint of pride in her smile. "Yes, well, we've always encouraged his creativity at home." The conversation lulled again, and Ava found herself wishing she could bridge the invisible gap between them. She'd faced this countless times before, the polite but distant interactions, the struggle to connect across racial and social divides. "Aunt Ava," Zoe's voice cut through the tension. "Can we get ice cream?" Grateful for the interruption, Ava stood up. "Of course, sweetie. Let's go see what flavors they have." As she helped Zoe out of the pool, Ava couldn't help but notice Sarah's barely concealed relief at her departure. She pushed down the familiar ache of exclusion and focused on her niece's excitement. They made their way to the small concession stand, joining the line of eager children and their parents. Ava felt a few more stares, heard a few more whispers. She held her head high, reminding herself that she had every right to be there. "What flavor are you thinking, Zoe?" Ava asked, running a hand through her niece's damp curls. Zoe's brow furrowed in concentration. Chocolate. No, wait, strawberry. Or maybe." Ava chuckled. "Take your time, sweetie. We're in no rush." As they waited, Ava's gaze wandered across the pool area. She saw families laughing together, friends catching up, children playing without a care in the world. It was a scene of suburban bliss, one that she'd always felt slightly removed from, despite living here for years. Yet Ava persevered. She poured her heart into her teaching, determined to make a difference in her students' lives. She volunteered for community events, joined the local book club, and did everything she could to be an active, positive presence in Oak Ridge. "I've decided," Zoe announced, snapping Ava back to the present. "I want rainbow sherbet." Ava smiled, pushing aside her heavy thoughts. "Rainbow sherbet it is, then?" As they got their ice cream and found a shady spot to sit, Ava watched the families around them. She saw love, laughter, and connection, all the things she yearned for in her own life. Despite the challenges, she refused to let go of hope. Someday, she thought, she'd find her place here. Someday, she'd be seen for who she truly was, not just the color of her skin. Ava reached into her bag, pulling out a worn paperback, her favorite summer read. As she flipped to her bookmarked page, she couldn't help but notice the subtle glances and whispers from some of the other pool-goers. It was nothing new. Being one of the few black families in Oak Ridge meant always feeling slightly out of place, even in public spaces like this. Shaking off the uncomfortable feeling, Ava immersed herself in her book. The familiar words were a welcome distraction from the world around her. However, her moment of peace was short-lived. A splash, louder than the others, caught her attention. Ava's eyes darted up from her book, scanning the pool area. At first, everything seemed normal, kids playing, parents chatting. But then she saw it, a small figure thrashing in the deep end of the pool. Time seemed to slow down as Ava's brain processed the scene before her. It was a little girl, no more than 6 or 7 years old, with blonde pigtails now plastered to her head. Her tiny arms flailed desperately as she struggled to keep her head above water. Ava's heart raced as she looked around, expecting to see a parent rushing to the rescue. But to her horror, no one seemed to notice the child's distress. The girl's parents, a couple Ava vaguely recognized from school events, were engrossed in conversation with friends, their backs turned to the pool. Without a second thought, Ava sprang into action. She tossed her book aside and kicked off her sandals, her teacher's instinct and lifeguard training from years ago taking over. In one fluid motion, she dove into the pool, her powerful strokes cutting through the water towards the struggling child. "Hold on, sweetie," Ava called out as she approached. "I'm coming." The little girl's eyes were wide with fear, her movements becoming weaker by the second. Just as Ava reached her, the child's head slipped beneath the surface. Ava took a deep breath and plunged underwater, her arms encircling the girl's small body. With a strong kick, she propelled them both back to the surface. Gasping for air, Ava held the child close, using one arm to keep them afloat while the other signaled for help. "I've got you," she reassured the girl, who had gone frighteningly still in her arms. "You're safe now." By this time, other pool-goers had noticed the commotion. Shouts of alarm rippled through the crowd as Ava swam towards the edge of the pool. Strong hands reached down to help them out, and suddenly they were on solid ground, surrounded by a growing crowd of onlookers. Ava's focus narrowed to the small, motionless body before her. The little girl wasn't breathing. Without hesitation, Ava began CPR, her training kicking in automatically. She tilted the child's head back, pinched her nose, and gave 2 rescue breaths. Then, she began chest compressions, counting under her breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, Ava murmured, her hands working tirelessly. The crowd around them had fallen silent, the only sound the rhythmic counting and the distant splash of water. "Come on, sweetheart," Ava whispered between compressions. "Breathe for me." Seconds felt like hours as Ava continued CPR. In the background, she could hear someone calling for an ambulance, but it all seemed far away. Her world had narrowed to this moment, this child, this desperate fight for life. And then, just as Ava was beginning to fear the worst, a miracle happened. The little girl coughed, water sputtering from her mouth. Her eyes fluttered open, filled with confusion and fear. A collective gasp of relief washed over the crowd. Ava gently turned the child onto her side, rubbing her back as she coughed up more water. "That's it, sweetie," she soothed. "You're okay. Just breathe." As the adrenaline began to subside, Ava became aware of the scene around her. A sea of faces stared down at them, some in awe, others in shock, and a few with expressions she couldn't quite read. She suddenly felt very exposed, her clothes clinging to her body, her hair a mess of wet curls. A commotion from the crowd caught her attention. A woman was pushing her way through, her face pale with fear. "Emily! Oh my God, Emily!" The woman, clearly the child's mother, dropped to her knees beside them. She reached for her daughter with shaking hands, her eyes wild with panic and relief. "She's all right," Ava assured her, gently helping to transfer the girl, Emily, into her mother's arms. "She's breathing normally now, but she should still be checked out by the paramedics when they arrive." The mother nodded, clutching Emily tightly. Her eyes met Ava's, and for a moment, Ava saw a flicker of something, gratitude, perhaps mixed with hesitation. The look made Ava's stomach twist uncomfortably. "Thank you," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. But there was a strain in her tone, a reluctance that Ava had heard too many times before. Before Ava could respond, a man pushed through the crowd, Emily's father. His face was a mask of concern as he knelt beside his wife and daughter. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She nearly drowned," his wife explained, her voice shaky. This woman saved her." The father's eyes finally landed on Ava, widening slightly as he took in her appearance. Ava could almost see the thoughts racing behind his eyes. Surprise, confusion, and something else she couldn't quite name. You saved our daughter?" he asked, his tone a mix of gratitude and disbelief. Ava nodded, suddenly feeling self-conscious under his scrutiny. "I saw her struggling in the deep end. I used to be a lifeguard, so I just reacted." The father nodded slowly, his arm going around his wife's shoulders. "Well, we can't thank you enough. Really." But despite his words, Ava could sense a hesitation in his manner. It was in the way he didn't quite meet her eyes, the stiffness in his posture. She'd encountered it before, the subtle discomfort some people felt when confronted with breaking their preconceived notions. The arrival of the paramedics broke the awkward moment. They quickly took charge of the situation, checking Emily's vital signs and preparing her for transport to the hospital for a thorough examination. As Emily was being tended to, Ava became acutely aware of the murmurs rippling through the crowd. She caught snippets of conversations, not all of them kind. "Can you believe it? Who is she? I've never seen her here before. How did none of us notice the girl drowning? Well, thank goodness she was here, I suppose." The last comment, spoken with a hint of reluctance, made Ava's chest tighten. She'd just saved a child's life, and yet some people seemed more concerned with the color of her skin than her heroic actions. Zoe appeared at Ava's side, wrapping her arms around her aunt's waist. "Aunt Ava, you're amazing. You saved that little girl." Ava managed a small smile, hugging her niece close. "I just did what anyone would do, sweetie." But as she looked around at the faces of her neighbors, some admiring, some skeptical, some openly hostile, Ava knew that wasn't entirely true. She had done something extraordinary, something that would ripple through this community in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Emily's parents were preparing to accompany their daughter to the hospital. As they stood up, Emily's mother turned to Ava once more. "Thank you again," she said, her voice a little steadier now. We don't know what we would have done if you hadn't been here." Ava nodded, offering a gentle smile. "I'm just glad I could help. I hope Emily feels better soon." As the family walked away, following the paramedics, Ava couldn't help but notice how neither parent had asked for her name or offered theirs. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it spoke volumes. The crowd began to disperse, people drifting back to their chairs or heading home, the excitement of the day wearing off. But Ava could feel their eyes on her, could hear the whispers that followed in her wake. "Aunt Ava," Zoe said, tugging at her hand. "Can we go home now?" Ava nodded, suddenly feeling exhausted. "Yes, sweetie. Let's go home." As they gathered their things, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that this incident was far from over. She had saved a life today, had proven her worth beyond any doubt. And yet, as she walked out of the pool area with Zoe, she sensed that her greatest challenge was still to come. The morning after the incident at the pool dawned bright and clear, But Ava Thompson woke with a sense of unease settling in her stomach. As she went through her morning routine, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally changed in her world. Stepping out onto her front porch to collect the newspaper, Ava noticed her neighbor, Mr. Peterson, watering his lawn across the street. Usually, he'd offer a cheerful wave and a good morning. But today, he quickly averted his gaze, suddenly very interested in adjusting the nozzle on his hose. Frowning, Ava picked up the newspaper and retreated inside. As she flipped through the pages, she found a small article about the incident at the pool. Her heart sank as she read the carefully worded piece, which seemed to downplay the severity of the situation. Local teacher assists in pool incident. The article barely mentioned the fact that she had performed CPR or that Emily had been unconscious. Instead, it focused on pool safety and the importance of parental supervision. Ava's name wasn't mentioned, but she was described as a 32-year-old teacher from the local elementary school. As she prepared for work, Ava's phone buzzed with notifications. She had been tagged in several social media posts about the incident. With a mix of curiosity and trepidation, she began to scroll through the comments. So proud of our community coming together in times of need. Accidents happen, but thank goodness everyone is okay. I heard the girl was just playing around. Some people will do anything for attention. That last comment made Ava's blood run cold. How could anyone think she had exaggerated the danger for attention? She had held Emily's lifeless body in her arms, had breathed life back into her lungs. The memory of those terrifying moments was etched into her mind. Shaking off her discomfort, Ava finished getting ready for work. She had a meeting with the principal today to discuss plans for the upcoming school year. As she drove to Oak Ridge Elementary, she tried to focus on the positive. She had saved a life. Surely that would outweigh any negative reactions, right? But as Ava walked into the school building, she immediately sensed a change in the atmosphere. Conversations hushed as she passed by, only to resume in hurried whispers once she was out of earshot. Her colleague, Susan, who usually greeted her warmly, gave only a tight-lipped smile before hurrying away. Confused and hurt, Ava made her way to the principal's office. As she waited outside, she overheard a heated conversation from within. Can't ignore the liability issues here, Tom. What if the parents decide to sue? Sue? For what? Saving their daughter's life. You know how these things can get twisted. We need to be prepared for any fallout. Ava's heart raced. Were they talking about her? About the incident at the pool? Before she could process what she'd heard, the door opened, and Principal Matthews stepped out. "Ah, Ava," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Come in, please." The meeting that followed was surreal. While they did discuss the upcoming school year, there was an undercurrent of tension that Ava couldn't ignore. Principal Matthews kept steering the conversation towards the pool incident, asking probing questions about what exactly had happened. "You're sure the child was actually in danger?" he asked at one point. "Sometimes kids can be dramatic, you know." Ava felt as if she'd been slapped. "Emily was unconscious when I pulled her from the water," she said firmly. "If I hadn't performed CPR, she could have died." Principal Matthews nodded, but Ava could see the doubt in his eyes. "Well, we're just glad everyone's okay," he said, effectively ending the conversation. As Ava left the office, she felt a wave of isolation wash over her. She had expected to be celebrated for her actions, or at the very least, acknowledged for her bravery. Instead, she was being treated with suspicion and doubt. The rest of the day didn't improve. During lunch in the teacher's lounge, Ava overheard snippets of conversation that made her stomach churn. I mean, what was she even doing at that pool? It's a shame how some people will do anything for attention. I heard the girl was fine, just playing around. Ava wanted to stand up, to shout that she had every right to be at that pool, that she had saved a child's life. But the words stuck in her throat. She felt outnumbered, isolated in a place that had once felt like a second home. As she was packing up to leave for the day, her colleague Mark stopped by her classroom. "Hey, Ava," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Heard about what happened at the pool. Must have been quite a scene, huh?" Ava nodded, wary of where this conversation might be heading. "It was intense," she admitted. "I'm just glad Emily is okay." Mark nodded, a strange look in his eyes. "Yeah, about that. I ran into Tim and Sarah at the grocery store last night. They seemed, I don't know, kind of uncomfortable about the whole thing. Ava's heart sank. Uncomfortable? What do you mean? Mark shrugged. Just got the impression they thought it might have been blown out of proportion, you know? They said Emily was fine, just a little shaken up. No hospital stay or anything. Ava felt a surge of anger. She wasn't breathing when I pulled her out, Mark. I had to perform CPR. That's not blown out of proportion. Mark held up his hands defensively. Hey, I'm just telling you what I heard. No need to get worked up about it. As he walked away, Ava felt a mix of frustration and despair. How had her heroic act been twisted into something controversial? The drive home was a blur of conflicting emotions. As Ava pulled into her driveway, she noticed Sarah and Tim, Emily's parents, walking on the other side of the street with their daughter. Ava's heart leapt at the sight of Emily, looking healthy and happy. She raised her hand to wave, a smile forming on her lips. But Sarah and Tim quickly averted their gaze, hurrying Emily along. The little girl looked back curiously, but her parents ushered her forward, pointedly ignoring Ava's presence. The rejection stung like a physical blow. Ava fumbled with her keys, fighting back tears as she let herself into her house. Once inside, she leaned against the door, finally allowing the emotions of the day to wash over her. How had things gone so wrong? She had saved Emily's life. There was no doubt about that in her mind. So why were people acting like she had done something wrong? As the evening wore on, Ava found herself scrolling through social media, unable to resist the urge to see what people were saying. The comments she found made her heart sink even further. I heard the teacher overreacted. The kid was just playing. Why is everyone making such a big deal out of this? Seems like attention-seeking to me. I don't feel comfortable with someone like that teaching our kids. Who knows what could happen? That last comment hit Ava like a punch to the gut. Someone like that. She knew exactly what they meant. A black woman who had dared to step out of the role they had assigned her, who had done something they couldn't quite comprehend or accept. Ava's phone buzzed with a text from her sister. How are you holding up? Heard some nasty rumors floating around. Don't let them get to you, sis. You're a hero, no matter what anyone says. The message brought fresh tears to Ava's eyes. At least her family understood the truth of what had happened. But it did little to ease the ache of isolation she felt in her own community. The next day at school was even worse. As Ava walked down the hallway, she overheard two teachers talking in hushed tones. I just don't understand why she was even at that pool. It's not really her, scene. I know, right? And now everyone's acting like she's some kind of hero. It's a bit much, if you ask me. Ava felt her cheeks burn with a mix of anger and shame. She wanted to confront them, to ask what exactly they meant by her scene. But she knew it would only make things worse. Instead, she held her head high and walked past, pretending she hadn't heard a word. During her free period, Ava found herself in the teacher's lounge, trying to grade papers but unable to focus. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, judged. Every whispered conversation, every sidelong glance felt like an accusation. Ava. She looked up to see Mrs. Rodriguez, one of the older teachers, standing by her table. Yes. Mrs. Rodriguez sat down, her kind eyes filled with concern. I just wanted to check on you, dear. I've heard some of the talk going around, and, well, I want you to know that not everyone believes those nasty rumors. Ava felt a lump form in her throat. Thank you, she managed to say. It's been difficult. Mrs. Rodriguez patted her hand. You did a brave thing, Ava. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. This town, well, sometimes it takes a while for people to come around, but they will, eventually. As Mrs. Rodriguez walked away, Ava felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe not everyone in Oak Ridge was against her. Maybe there were still people who could see past their prejudices and recognize her act for what it was, pure, selfless heroism. As the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Ava felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. She could finally escape the whispers, the stares, and the thinly veiled accusations. But as she packed up her things, preparing to leave, Principal Matthews appeared at her classroom door. Ava, can I see you in my office for a moment? He asked, his expression unreadable. Heart sinking, Ava followed him down the hallway. In his office, Principal Matthews gestured for her to take a seat, his face grave. "Ava," he began, "I'm sure you're aware of the situation that's developed since the incident at the pool." Ava nodded, bracing herself for what was to come. "I've received several calls from concerned parents," he continued. "They're questioning your judgment, your ability to handle crisis situations. And now, Emily's parents are thinking about taking legal action. They are saying that you used their daughter for attention." "But I saved her life," Ava protested, her voice rising with frustration. "How can they possibly twist that into something negative?" Principal Matthews sighed, rubbing his temples. "The issue isn't whether you saved her or not, Ava. It's about liability, about the school's reputation. We can't afford to have this kind of controversy surrounding one of our teachers." Ava felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that it might be best if you took some time off," he said carefully. "Just until this all blows over. Paid leave, of course." The words hit Ava like a physical blow. Time off? She was being punished for saving a child's life? "This isn't right," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I did nothing wrong. I used my training to save Emily's life. How can that possibly be grounds for suspension?" Principal Matthews held up his hands defensively. "It's not a suspension, Ava. It's just a cooling-off period, for everyone's benefit." As Ava left the office, her mind in a whirl, she couldn't help but wonder how things had gone so terribly wrong. She had acted on instinct, using her skills to save a life. And now, instead of being celebrated as a hero, she was being treated like a pariah. The drive home was a blur of conflicting emotions. Anger at the injustice of it all, hurt at the way her colleagues and neighbors had turned on her. And underneath it all, a deep, gnawing fear about what this meant for her future in Oak Ridge. As she pulled into her driveway, Ava noticed a small group of neighbors gathered on the sidewalk across the street. They fell silent as she got out of her car, their eyes following her as she walked to her front door. She could feel the weight of their judgment, their unspoken accusations. Inside, Ava collapsed onto her couch, the events of the day finally overwhelming her. She thought about the life she had built in Oak Ridge, her job that she loved, the home she had made for herself, the community she had tried so hard to be a part of. And now, it all seemed to be crumbling around her. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "Heard what happened at school. This is BS, sis. You're a hero, no matter what those small-minded people say. Want me to come over?" Ava felt a lump form in her throat. At least her family still believed in her. But it did little to ease the ache of isolation she felt in her own community. As the evening wore on, Ava found herself unable to shake off the feeling of being watched, judged. Every car that drove by, every voice she heard outside, made her tense up. She felt like a stranger in her own home, in the neighborhood she had lived in for years. Unable to bear the silence any longer, Ava decided to take a walk, hoping the fresh air might clear her head. But as she stepped outside, she immediately regretted her decision. Her neighbors, who were usually friendly or at least polite, now averted their eyes or hurried inside their houses. The few who did meet her gaze did so with suspicion or outright hostility. As she rounded the corner, Ava came face to face with Sarah and Tim, walking hand in hand with Emily. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Emily's eyes lit up with recognition, and she opened her mouth as if to speak. But Sarah quickly pulled her closer, shooting Ava a warning glare. "Emily, honey, don't talk to strangers," Tim said loudly, purposefully looking right through Ava as if she wasn't there. Ava felt her heart break a little more. She wasn't a stranger. She was the woman who had saved their daughter's life. But in their eyes, she had become something dangerous, something to be feared and avoided. As she watched them hurry away, Ava felt the full weight of her isolation descend upon her. She had saved a life, had done everything right, and yet here she was ostracized, suspended from her job, and treated like a pariah in her own community. For the first time since the incident, Ava allowed herself to cry. The tears came hot and fast, a release of all the pent-up emotion she had been holding back. She cried for the injustice of it all, for the way her act of heroism had been twisted and misunderstood. She cried for the community she had thought she was a part of, and for the harsh reality of the prejudices that still existed beneath the surface. The days dragged on. each one blending into the next in a haze of isolation and uncertainty. She found herself avoiding her usual routines, wary of the stares and whispers that seemed to follow her everywhere she went. The community that had once felt like home now felt alien and hostile. It was on a particularly gloomy Tuesday afternoon that an unexpected ray of hope broke through the clouds of Ava's despair. As she sat on her front porch, lost in thought, a small figure came into view. It was Emily, the little girl she had saved, cautiously making her way up the sidewalk. Ava's heart raced. She glanced around, half expecting to see Sarah or Tim rushing to pull their daughter away. But Emily was alone, clutching something in her hands as she approached. "Ms. Thompson?" Emily's voice was soft, tinged with nervousness. Ava managed a smile, trying to put the child at ease. "Hello, Emily. How are you feeling?" Emily shuffled her feet, then thrust out her hands, offering Ava a slightly crumpled envelope and a small, clumsily wrapped package. "I made these for you," she said in a rush. "Mommy and Daddy said I shouldn't, but I wanted to say thank you for saving me." Tears pricked at Ava's eyes as she gently took the offerings. "Oh, Emily," she murmured, overcome with emotion. "Thank you. This means so much to me." Emily's face lit up with a shy smile. Can I give you a hug?" Without hesitation, Ava opened her arms, and Emily rushed into them. As she held the little girl close, Ava felt a weight lifting from her heart. This innocent gesture of gratitude, untainted by adult prejudices, was a balm to her wounded spirit. "You're my hero, Miss Thompson," Emily whispered before pulling away. "I don't care what anyone else says." As Emily scampered off, occasionally glancing back with a wave, Ava clutched the letter and gift to her chest. She waited until the little girl was out of sight before carefully opening the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a crayon drawing of two stick figures, one tall with curly hair, the other small with pigtails. They were holding hands, surrounded by hearts. Beneath the drawing, in wobbly handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for saving me. You are my hero. Love, Emily." Ava's vision blurred with tears as she read the heartfelt message. She then unwrapped the small package to find a plastic medal, the kind given out at school events, with "Hero" written on it in glitter glue. This simple act of gratitude from Emily was like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. It reminded Ava that despite the backlash, despite the doubts and accusations, what she had done was real and valuable. She had saved a life, and in the eyes of the person who mattered most, the child she had rescued, she was indeed a hero. Clutching Emily's gifts, Ava went inside, her steps lighter than they had been in days. She placed the drawing and medal on her mantle, a visible reminder of the truth amid all the lies and misconceptions swirling around her. As she stood there, gazing at Emily's heartfelt offerings, Ava's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number was unfamiliar, and for a moment, she hesitated, wary of more accusations or threats. But something compelled her to answer. "Hello, is this Ava Thompson?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, this is she," Ava replied cautiously. "Miss Thompson, my name is Marcus Johnson. I'm a journalist with the National Tribune. I've been hearing some interesting things about an incident at your local pool, and I was hoping to talk to you about it." Ava's heart raced. A journalist? From a national paper? How had her story reached so far? I'm not sure what to say," Ava stammered. "It's been a difficult time." Marcus's voice softened. "I can imagine. That's actually why I'm calling. I've heard conflicting accounts of what happened, and I'm interested in telling your side of the story. It seems to me that there's more going on here than just a simple pool rescue." Ava hesitated. She had been burned so many times already by people twisting her words and actions. Could she trust this stranger to tell her story fairly? As if sensing her reluctance, Marcus continued. "Miss Thompson, I'll be honest with you. What I'm hearing about a woman saving a child's life and then facing backlash from her community, it doesn't sit right with me. I think this is a story that needs to be told, and I'd like to give you the platform to tell it." Ava's eyes drifted to Emily's drawing on the mantel. She thought about the little girl's bravery in coming to thank her, despite her parents' disapproval. Maybe it was time for Ava to be brave too. "Okay, she said finally. I'll talk to you, but I want to tell the whole truth, not just the parts that make for a good headline. That's exactly what I'm looking for, Marcus assured her. How about we meet tomorrow? I can come to you. Make it as comfortable as possible. They set a time, and as Ava hung up the phone, she felt a mix of anxiety and hope. This could be her chance to set the record straight, to tell her story without the filter of small-town gossip and prejudice. The next day, Ava found herself sitting across from Marcus in her living room. He was younger than she had expected, with kind eyes and an easy smile that helped put her at ease. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Miss Thompson, Marcus began, setting up his recorder. Why don't we start at the beginning? Can you tell me about the day of the incident at the pool? Taking a deep breath, Ava began to recount the events of that fateful day. As she spoke, she found the words flowing more easily than she had expected. She described the peaceful afternoon at the pool, the sudden realization that Emily was in danger, the adrenaline-fueled rescue, and the tense moments of CPR that brought the little girl back to life. Marcus listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification, but mostly letting Ava tell her story in her own words. When she got to the part about the community's reaction, his brow furrowed with concern. So you're saying that instead of being celebrated for your heroic actions, you face suspicion and hostility? He asked, his pen poised over his notepad. Ava nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. It was like they couldn't reconcile the idea of me, a black woman, being a hero. Some people even suggested I had exaggerated the danger for attention. Marcus shook his head, a look of disbelief on his face. And Emily's parents? How did they react? Ava's voice wavered as she recounted her encounters with Sarah and Tim, their cold dismissal of her action. They're acting like I did something wrong by saving their daughter, she finished, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. As the interview continued, Ava found herself opening up about more than just the incident at the pool. She talked about her experiences as one of the few black teachers in a predominantly white school, the subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, prejudices she faced daily, and her deep love for her students despite it all. Ms. Thompson, Marcus said as the interview drew to a close, I want to thank you for your honesty and bravery in sharing your story. I think it's an important one that needs to be told. Ava managed a small smile. Thank you for listening. I hope this can make a difference somehow. As Marcus packed up his equipment, he paused, looking at Ava with sincere admiration. You know, in my line of work, I meet a lot of people who call themselves heroes. But you, Ms. Thompson, you're the real deal. Don't let anyone tell you differently. After Marcus left, Ava felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. She had told her story, laid bare her experiences and feelings. Now, all she could do was wait and see what would come of it. The article was published a week later, and the impact was immediate and far-reaching. Marcus had done a masterful job of presenting Ava's story, weaving together the events at the pool with the larger context of racial bias and the often overlooked contributions of black women in society. The headline read, Hero or Pariah? The shocking story of a black teacher who saved a child's life and paid the price. As Ava read the article, she felt a whirlwind of emotions. Marcus had captured her voice perfectly, presenting her experiences with sensitivity and depth. He had also included quotes from child safety experts who praised Ava's quick thinking and life-saving actions, as well as social commentators who spoke about the broader implications of the community's reaction. What Ava wasn't prepared for was how quickly the story spread. Within hours of publication, it had been picked up by major news outlets across the country. Her phone began buzzing incessantly with notifications as the article was shared thousands of times on social media. Hashtag Justice for Ava began trending on Twitter, with people from all walks of life expressing their outrage at her treatment and their admiration for her bravery. Ava watched in amazement as her story sparked a national conversation. News panels debated the racial dynamics at play, while social media exploded with personal stories from other black women who had faced similar prejudices in their own communities. Celebrities and influencers began sharing the article, adding their voices to the chorus of support for Ava. A famous actress tweeted, Ava Thompson is a hero, plain and simple. The fact that she's facing backlash for saving a child's life shows how far we still have to go in addressing racial bias. Hashtag Justice for Ava. As the day wore on, Ava's email inbox filled with messages of support from strangers across the country. Many shared their own experiences of facing prejudice, thanking her for having the courage to speak out. One email in particular caught her attention. It was from a group of Black female teachers in a neighboring state. Dear Ms. Thompson, your story has touched us deeply. As fellow educators who have often felt undervalued and misunderstood, we stand with you in solidarity. You are not alone. Your bravery in saving that child and in sharing your story inspires us all to keep fighting for recognition and respect. Thank you for being a light in the darkness. Hashtag Black Teachers Matter. Tears streamed down Ava's face as she read message after message of support and encouragement. For the first time since the incident, she felt truly seen and understood. But it wasn't just strangers who were reaching out. As the story gained traction, some of Ava's colleagues who had previously distanced themselves began to reach out, offering apologies and support. Susan, the teacher who had avoided her in the halls, left a tearful voicemail. Ava, I'm so sorry. I let fear and gossip cloud my judgment. You're an amazing teacher and an incredible person. What you did was nothing short of heroic. Please forgive me for not standing by you from the beginning. Even some of her neighbors, who had been quick to judge, seemed to be having a change of heart. Mrs. Peterson from across the street brought over a homemade casserole, her eyes brimming with unshed tears as she apologized for her husband's behavior. We were wrong, Ava, she said, her voice thick with emotion. So terribly wrong. Can you ever forgive us? Ava accepted the apology with grace, recognizing the courage it took to admit one's mistakes. It was a small step, but an important one in healing the rifts that had formed in her community. As the media frenzy continued, Ava received a call from a civil rights organization offering legal support if she decided to fight her suspension from the school. They saw her case as an important opportunity to address systemic biases in education and community responses to heroism by people of color. The publicity also brought unexpected allies. A group of lifeguards from across the state started an online petition demanding that Ava be recognized for her life-saving actions. The petition quickly gathered thousands of signatures, along with comments praising Ava's quick thinking and bravery. One comment stood out. As a lifeguard with 15 years of experience, I can say without a doubt that Ava Thompson's actions were textbook perfect. She assessed the situation, acted swiftly, and performed CPR when necessary. She saved that child's life, period. The color of her skin has nothing to do with her heroism. She deserves a medal, not persecution. The national attention also seemed to be having an effect locally. Ava began to notice a shift in how people in Oak Ridge were treating her. The cold stares and whispered conversations were replaced by tentative smiles and words of support. It was as if the outside validation had forced many in the community to reevaluate their own biases and reactions. One evening, as Ava was tending to her small garden in the front yard, an activity she had avoided since the incident, she heard a commotion down the street. Looking up, she saw a group of her students approaching, led by their parents. For a moment, Ava's heart raced, unsure of what to expect. But as they drew closer, she saw that they were smiling. Many of the children were carrying handmade signs with messages like "Ms. Thompson is our hero," and "We stand with Ava." One of the parents, Mr. Rodriguez, stepped forward. "Ms. Thompson," he began, his voice filled with emotion, "we want to apologize for how this community has treated you. Our children never doubted you for a second. They've been telling us all along what an amazing teacher and person you are. We should have listened to them from the start." Ava felt overwhelmed as each student came forward to give her a hug or present her with a card or drawing. These were the children she had poured her heart into teaching, the ones who saw her for who she truly was, beyond the color of her skin. As the impromptu gathering continued, more neighbors came out to join, many offering their own apologies and words of support. It wasn't everyone, and Ava knew there were still those in the community who held on to their prejudices. But it was a start, a sign that hearts and minds could change. The media attention also forced the school board to reconsider its position. A few days after the article went viral, Ava received a call from Principal Matthews. His voice was strained as he asked her to come in for a meeting. When Ava arrived at the school, she was surprised to find not just Principal Matthews, but also several members of the school board waiting for her. The atmosphere was tense as she took a seat, facing the group that had so quickly turned their backs on her. Dr. Harris, the head of the school board, cleared her throat before speaking. "Ms. Thompson, we've asked you here today to offer our sincerest apologies. We acted hastily and unjustly in placing you on leave. Your actions at the pool were nothing short of heroic, and our response was colored by biases we didn't even realize we held." Ava sat in stunned silence as Dr. Harris continued. "We'd like to offer you immediate reinstatement, with full back pay for the time you were on leave. Additionally, we're proposing a series of diversity and bias training sessions for all staff, which we'd be honored if you'd help develop." Principal Matthews chimed in, unable to meet Ava's eyes. "I also owe you a personal apology, Ava. I let fear of controversy cloud my judgment. You're one of the best teachers we have, and I should have stood by you from the beginning." As the meeting continued, Ava felt a mix of emotions: vindication, relief, but also a lingering hurt from how quickly she had been cast aside. She accepted their apologies and the offer of reinstatement, but she also made it clear that rebuilding trust would take time. "I appreciate your apologies and your offer," Ava said, her voice steady. "I love teaching, and I love my students. But what happened to me isn't an isolated incident. It's a symptom of deeper issues that we need to address. I'm willing to work with you on that, but I need to know that this commitment to change is genuine and long-lasting." The board members nodded solemnly, seeming to understand the magnitude of what Ava was saying. There was a long road ahead, but this was a crucial first step. As news of Ava's reinstatement spread, it added fuel to the ongoing national conversation. Educational experts began discussing the importance of diversity in teaching staff and the need for better support systems for teachers of color. Ava's story was held up as an example of both the challenges faced by Black educators and the positive impact they can have on their students and communities. Amidst all the public attention, Ava received another visitor, Sarah and Tim, Emily's parents. They arrived at her door one evening, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Ms. Thompson," Tim began, his voice rough with emotion, "we owe you an apology. A big one." Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. "We were so scared when it happened, and then we let our own biases and the gossip around town cloud our judgment. We forgot the most important thing. You saved our daughter's life." Ava stood in her doorway, a mix of emotions swirling within her. Part of her wanted to slam the door, to shut out the people who had caused her so much pain. But another part, the part that had always believed in the power of understanding and forgiveness, held her ground. "Please," Tim said, his voice cracking. "Can we come in and talk?" After a moment's hesitation, Ava stepped aside, allowing them to enter. They sat in her living room, an uncomfortable silence stretching between them. Sarah's eyes landed on Emily's drawing on the mantel. "She made that for you, didn't she?" she asked softly. Ava nodded. "She came by to thank me. It meant more than I can say." Tim hung his head. "We told her not to, you know. We were so caught up in our own fear and prejudice that we couldn't see what was right in front of us. Our daughter knew the truth, but we wouldn't listen." As the conversation unfolded, Sarah and Tim poured out their hearts. They spoke of their initial shock and fear after the incident, how easily they had fallen into the trap of suspicion and mistrust. They admitted to their own deeply ingrained biases they hadn't even realized they held until faced with this situation. "We've done a lot of soul-searching these past few weeks," Sarah said, wiping away tears. "The article, the public reaction, it forced us to confront some ugly truths about ourselves. We're ashamed of how we acted, Ms. Thompson. You saved our daughter's life, and we repaid you with suspicion and ingratitude." Ava listened, her own eyes filling with tears. "Do you know how much it hurt?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To be treated like a criminal for saving a child's life? To have the community I've given so much to turn their backs on me?" Tim nodded, unable to meet her gaze. "We can't imagine the pain we've caused you. We don't expect forgiveness, Miss Thompson. We needed you to know how sorry we are and how grateful we are for what you did for Emily. As the conversation continued, Ava felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The hurt wasn't gone, but hearing Sarah and Tim acknowledge their mistakes, seeing their genuine remorse, began to heal wounds she thought might never close. I won't pretend it's all okay now, Ava said finally. What happened, it's going to take time to process. But I appreciate you coming here, admitting your mistakes. It's a start. Before they left, Sarah hesitated, then pulled out an envelope from her purse. We've decided to drop any idea of legal action. In fact, we've written a public statement clearing your name and thanking you for saving Emily. We're going to send it to the paper tomorrow. Ava took the envelope, her hand shaking slightly. Thank you, she said softly. That means a lot. As Sarah and Tim left, Ava felt as if a chapter was closing. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope for real change. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah and Tim's public statement, combined with Ava's reinstatement at the school, sparked a new wave of media attention. But this time, the narrative was different. Instead of controversy, the focus was on reconciliation, on a community coming together to confront its biases and work towards positive change. Ava found herself at the center of it all, a reluctant symbol of resilience and forgiveness. She was invited to speak at community events, sharing her experiences and insights on combating racial bias. At first, she was hesitant, still raw from her ordeal. But as she saw the impact her words were having, she embraced her new role. At one particularly memorable town hall meeting, Ava stood before a packed auditorium, her voice strong and clear. What happened to me isn't unique, she began. Every day, people of color face prejudice and discrimination, often in subtle ways that are easy for others to overlook or dismiss. But my experience shows how quickly those underlying biases can surface in times of stress or fear. She paused, looking out over the sea of faces, some familiar, some new, all listening intently. The easy thing would be to point fingers, to lay blame. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I believe in the power of education, not just in our schools, but in our community. We have an opportunity here, an opportunity to learn from this experience and to grow. As Ava continued her speech, she could see the impact of her words. People nodded, some wiped away tears. She saw a dawning understanding on faces that had once looked at her with suspicion. Change isn't easy, she concluded. It requires us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our society. But I've seen firsthand the power of that change. I've seen people acknowledge their mistakes and commit to doing better. That gives me hope, and I invite all of you to join me on this journey of understanding and growth. The applause that followed was thunderous. As Ava stepped down from the podium, she was enveloped in a sea of hugs and handshakes. People she had never spoken to before came up to thank her, to share their own stories, to ask how they could help make a difference. In the weeks that followed, Ava saw real changes beginning to take root in Oak Ridge. The school board, true to their word, implemented comprehensive diversity and bias training for all staff. Ava played a key role in developing the curriculum, drawing on her own experiences to create meaningful, impactful sessions. The ripple effects spread beyond the school. Community groups began organizing workshops on racial equity and inclusion. The local library started a monthly book club focused on works by authors of color. Even the town council announced plans to review local policies and practices to ensure they were equitable and inclusive. Ava's students, too, were affected by the changes. In her classroom, she noticed a new openness in discussions about race and diversity. Her students, inspired by her example, started a kindness club dedicated to promoting understanding and acceptance throughout the school. One day, as Ava was leaving school, she found Emily waiting for her by her car. The little girl rushed forward, wrapping her arms around Ava's waist. "Miss Thompson, I got an A on my history project," Emily exclaimed, her face beaming with pride. Ava hugged her back, a warm smile spreading across her face. "That's wonderful, Emily. I knew you could do it." As Emily chattered excitedly about her project, Ava saw Sarah approaching, a tentative smile on her face. "I hope you don't mind," Sarah said. Emily insisted on waiting to tell you her news in person. Ava shook her head. "Not at all. I'm always happy to celebrate my students' successes." There was still a hint of awkwardness between them, but it was overshadowed by the genuine warmth in Sarah's eyes. "We're having a little celebration dinner for Emily tonight," she said. "We'd be honored if you'd join us." The invitation caught Ava off guard. She hesitated for a moment, memories of past hurts flashing through her mind. But as she looked down at Emily's hopeful face, she felt her reservations melting away. "I'd love to," she said softly. That evening, as Ava sat around the dinner table with Emily and her family, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and shared stories. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, unspoken words hanging in the air. But it was a start, a step towards healing and understanding. As the weeks turned into months, Ava watched her community continue to evolve. The changes weren't always smooth or easy. There were setbacks, moments of frustration when old habits and biases resurfaced. But each time, Ava saw people making conscious efforts to do better, to learn and grow. Her own life, too, was transforming. The national attention her story had received led to opportunities she had never imagined. She was invited to speak at educational conferences, sharing her experiences and insights with teachers from across the country. She even started writing a book chronicling her journey and offering guidance for creating more inclusive educational environments. But perhaps the most significant change came on a warm spring afternoon, almost a year after the incident at the pool. Ava was in her classroom after school, preparing for the next day's lessons, when there was a knock at her door. "Come in," she called, looking up from her desk. To her surprise, it was Principal Matthews, accompanied by Dr. Harris from the school board and Mayor Thompson. "Ava," Principal Matthews began, an unfamiliar note of excitement in his voice. "We have some news we'd like to share with you." Dr. Harris stepped forward, a warm smile on her face. "Ms. Thompson, in recognition of your outstanding contributions to our school and community, we'd like to offer you a new position. We're creating a role of diversity and inclusion coordinator for the entire school district, and we believe you're the perfect person for the job." Ava sat in stunned silence as they outlined the details of the position. It would involve working with all the schools in the district to implement diversity initiatives, train staff, and ensure equitable practices across the board. "Your experience and your dedication to education make you uniquely qualified for this role," Mayor Thompson added. "You've already done so much to bring our community together. We believe you can help us create lasting, systemic change." As the implications of their offer sank in, Ava felt a rush of emotions. Pride, excitement, a touch of apprehension, and overwhelming gratitude. This was an opportunity to make a real difference, to help shape a more inclusive future for students and teachers alike. I don't know what to say," Ava finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. Principal Matthews smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes that Ava had rarely seen before. "Say yes, Ava. You've shown us all what true leadership looks like. Now, help us build on what you've started." Ava looked around her classroom, at the colorful posters and student projects lining the walls. She thought of all the children she'd taught over the years, the lives she'd touched. And she thought of Emily, of that terrifying moment at the pool that had set this whole journey in motion. With a deep breath, she turned back to the group. "Yes," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Yes, I'd be honored to take on this role." The room erupted in smiles and congratulations. As they discussed next steps and future plans, Ava felt a sense of purpose settling over her. She had always known that education was her calling, but now she saw a broader vision of what that could mean. That evening, as Ava sat on her front porch, watching the sun set over her neighborhood, she reflected on the incredible journey of the past year. From the depths of despair and isolation, she had risen to find a new purpose, a new role in her community. She thought of all the people who had played a part in this transformation, her students, her colleagues, even those who had initially turned against her. Each interaction, Each challenge had shaped her, strengthening her resolve and deepening her understanding. As the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Ava made a silent promise to herself and to her community. She would continue to fight for understanding, to bridge divides, to create spaces where everyone felt seen and valued. It wouldn't always be easy, but she was ready for the challenge. A movement caught her eye, and Ava looked up to see a group of her neighbors out for an evening walk. Among them were faces that had once looked at her with suspicion, now offering warm smiles and friendly waves. Ava waved back, a sense of belonging washing over her. This was her home, her community, and together, they were writing a new chapter, one of growth, understanding, and hope for a brighter, more inclusive future. As Ava stood to go inside, she paused for a moment, taking in the peaceful scene before her. She thought of the little girl she'd saved, of the ripples that one act had sent out into the world. And she smiled, knowing that sometimes the greatest changes start with a single moment of courage. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But Ava Thompson was ready, eager to see where this new path would lead. As she closed her front door, she felt a sense of excitement for the future, for all the lives she would touch and all the changes she would help bring about. In that moment, Ava knew that her true heroism wasn't just in saving a life that day at the pool. It was in her unwavering commitment to education, to understanding, and to building a community where everyone could thrive. And that was a mission she would gladly dedicate her life to, one day at a time. What would you do if you were in Ava's shoes, having just saved a child's life, only to face whispers, stares, and an unexpected battle for your dignity? Would you have had the courage to stand tall, even when the world seemed against you? Or would you have handled things differently? If this story of bravery, resilience, and standing up for what's right resonated with you, please consider subscribing to my channel. I put my heart into creating these meaningful narratives, and your support means everything. Thank you for being a part of this journey.